There's one thing that's gone unaddressed in Frieren for a while. Maybe the biggest unresolved mystery. It is this sword. Not the replica, the real one. The hero's sword. Goddess sword. You know, it's the master sword or the sword in the stone. You know the idea. A special sword laying there until a hero pulls it. Is it Chekhov's gun in waiting, or just a parable about what actually makes the hero? There's a reason people expect more to come with the sword, but also a case to be made that the mystery of the sword's threat doesn't need solving. Let's start with why the hero's sword still keeps people waiting for a resolution. It kind of looks like it belongs to a certain Russian playwright. Let's be quick here, because I'm sure pretty much everyone knows this. Chekhov's gun is a dramatic device that if you introduce something to the narrative, it needs a payoff. Most commonly it's a gun, but it doesn't have to be a gun. It can be a sword. It can also be a little guy who hasn't done anything yet, and you know when he does, it's going to be something cool.
But Marge, that little guy hasn't done anything yet. Look at him. He's gonna do something, and you know it's gonna be good.
Essentially, if a gun is featured in the story, then it needs to be fired at some point. It comes from the playwright Chekhov, who said of a superfluous gun which never goes off that it's wrong to make promises you don't mean to keep. Now, there's plenty of examples of firearms that still satisfy their role in the narrative without being fired. It's not a literal weapon needing to be used, but the dramatic point. It can be resolved even when you don't use the weapon if not using it is just as thematically important. So in a dramatic sense, the gun is still used. So then, the hero's sword. It sat in a village. Himmel never managed to pull it, but it did serve a purpose. It's still awaiting a hero who will save the world from a great calamity. We have both a weapon and a role in the narrative established, but one that on the surface goes completely unresolved. It's a mystery. So the great evil wasn't the Demon King. It's something potentially worse coming in the future. If the hero's sword legend is true, then there's something bigger coming, potentially a bigger threat, maybe another demon, one further down the evolutionary line that we're seeing, where they can become a threat to the world, not just humanity. Or maybe it's something new entirely, some kind of monstrosity that can make demons and demon slayers shiver. I mean, maybe there's something more sinister out there, a different threat, maybe even one that's not entirely related to demons, something crazy. They're evolving demons, they're getting better at understanding their prey. The Demon King was a particularly successful case, but elves like Frieren will live long enough to see how demons change down the line. They could become much more powerful. That might be what the sword is holding out for. Eventually, maybe. Probably. But there's something to this in Frieren. Their era of peace probably won't be forever. Heroes' deeds only last so long. Statues fade, legends even fade, and eventually few remember. In the further future, there could be something worse. The Great Calamity. But we probably don't have to worry about that for our narrative because it's so far out. It's more of a world-building detail. I'm sure a bigger threat will occur at some point. But a world-ending calamity beyond the Demon King within the timescale of this story? I just don't know. If it isn't a threat our heroes are going to be facing, it's just the possibility of something in the future, then it isn't a gun waiting to be fired, it's already served its purpose, which was a different purpose to the story behind the sword. We'd have to separate out that prophecy from the actual dramatic purpose. On the other hand, I've heard some people think that it means the Demon King isn't entirely dead, maybe broken, maybe in some sort of catatonic state, but not quite finished off. Out of the theories, this is the one I like the least. I'm sure it would be well enough done if the story did go that way, but it kind of feels like something that would harm the characters and their journeys so far by taking away more than it adds. It would undercut the premise pretty widely just for a weak comeback. Plus, if the sword was the only hint at this, I mean, that would come out of nowhere. Another potential closure to this threat is a paradox. Now, this is one that's just pure speculation, but I've seen this fan theory thrown around. Is the idea that it's Himmel's sword, but with goddess magic time travel shenanigans. Which, yeah, it's fun. It's a fun theory, but it's the type of thing that would be a narrative dead end. Thematically, it would work, but it would entail so much happening for a payoff that just closes up a legend from a long time ago. Himmel was buried with the sword. It would kinda suck if someone went back to grave rob it.
You'll haul his bones out of the ground, dig up his grave, pull out his tongue.
Just to send it back in time to become the hero's sword. Then Himmel buys a replica of it, which becomes the same sword again. These kind of bootstrap paradox things are fun, but it would involve digging Himmel back up. I mean, it's messy. But both of these rest on the assumption that the plot thread, the legend of the greater calamity, is unresolved. But I don't know if that was the point of the sword as a whole. The legend might not really matter. I think the story, the myth, is different to its dramatic purpose. The other way of looking at it is that the sword isn't there to be pulled out. This can be because the legend is just a legend. The sword could even not really be a sword underneath, like it's not even really pullable. It's like a diglet under the surface. We know it's got some lingering of the goddess's magic around it, monsters are drawn to it, but beyond that, who knows? But it's there as a test of strength for heroes, just a different kind of test. It's to teach each generation a valuable lesson, that they will face setbacks, plenty of challenges to their resolve. To be a hero is to get past that, as we saw Himmel do. A hero doesn't come from a sword or an axe, or from finishing a challengingly giant hamburger. It comes from the hero's deeds. Doing a good thing doesn't require the hype that comes with having the one and only sword of a hero. The stakes of a battle against a world-ending terror. Himmel's party trying to chase out a larger evil. That was just something they did eventually. Most of the journey was spreading good and doing heroic things wherever they went. It's not about a single good deed, and this version of the story is what we need for that. Its role in the narrative isn't to go off, it's to be used to slay some great evil. It's to show that you don't need to pull a legendary sword to do good. Then there's the fact that Himmel didn't actually need the sword. If the hero's sword is some kind of predetermined thing where it's pulled when it's needed and the sword knows through magic, then of course Himmel couldn't pull it. He didn't need it. He stopped the Demon King without it. What's special about Himmel's sword is that it's his sword, not that the sword itself is magic. And in inspiring Himmel, the hero's sword did its job with or without being pulled. So the crux of what I'm trying to say is that the gun has already been fired. The purpose isn't always seeing it drawn. The legend could even be directly fulfilled without it being pulled. Himmel's actions inspire Frieren to go on her current journey. The sword being pulled or not, if the current party ends up facing a great calamity, by inspiring this group to come together in the first place, it would have helped just as much as if it had been pulled. Essentially, it doesn't seem like the Demon King was the threat that the sword was there for, but the myth of the sword could be about anything. For our dramatic purposes, the sword is there to teach us about Himmel and the nature of a hero. I think either solution works, and if it's waiting for a great threat and it's still the unresolved factor, but I personally prefer it as it is, that the sword is done. His purpose in the story has been resolved, the mystery of what the myth was referring to. Or even if it's true, that might not matter. But that doesn't need solving. Without being used, the sword has inspired the creation of a real hero's sword, and a real hero.